Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome to my first video of Planet Coaster 2 and my first build video. Today I'll be starting a park with a fantasy steampunk vibe that I have been thinking a lot about and already have a lot of ideas for. And today we will lay down some pathing and start the build for a ride that will be one of the main features and one that I have been thinking about actually for a long time, since shortly before or after Planet Coaster 2 came out. So stick around for that, because at the end of the video I have a little teaser of the main character of that ride. So for the fantasy steampunk section, which truthfully may end up being the entire park if it takes me too long, we'll be surrounding a gorge with water and water features and hopefully make for some really nice views. So here I'm showing the layout. I'm starting with the pathwork, which is at multiple levels, and you'll see me various different forms around. So after I get done with that, then I'll explain where I believe certain things are going to go and why I've done the layout in the way I have. Okay, so here's the completed pathing. Here where the little figure is shows that this is the entrance overlook. So this is where the guests will first arrive, and you'll be able to see down into the gorge and across it. This first street will have buildings on both sides, which will kind of go down the hill to the second path there that is along the water. So the brown marks you'll see where I've changed the color of the terrain, that's to indicate partly where the gorge will go, and so I'm kind of building around that with the paths. The idea behind the steampunk fantasy, it's going to be a little bit Victorian, a little bit kind of French steampunk, whatever kind of I find that I like, but probably a lot of different architecture styles. So here I'm crossing a bridge that will go across the gorge. This is a square that will be surrounded by buildings and have a ride entrance to another ride that I'm already thinking about. And then here another street that goes down to this circle, which will be where the ride entrance for the Magic Library is that I'm going to build today. There's going to be some interesting sides to it. We'll probably do the next video. Here it's showing some more pathing that are streets. I have this staircase going down and I haven't connected it because I'm not sure that's where I want it to go. Here I'm showing the path on the water and then the bridge across to the other side. And then finally there's some paths here which connect to stairs up that go to a queue to a possibly a flat ride. And this will be up in an island in the center of the gorge. So here I'm going to start the entrance, which I've decided is going to be a rotunda. And these are 3 columns that I actually have already created. And I'm going to use the one on the left as one of the main features on the exterior of the building. And you'll see that eventually I decide I don't like the spacing because it looks like it's too narrow between 2 sets. And so for the main entrance, I'm going to move some of them, create wider entrance at the front of it. And so basically that ends up making the rotunda not symmetrical or not the same distance between the column openings on each set of columns, which is okay. I've decided that I like it. So basically it creates a rotunda where the front entrance and the back are larger than the side openings. So this is where I start the dome on top of the rotunda, and the style here obviously is more classical. So I'm going to make it the roof kind of classical, but also a little bit of fantasy and steampunk involved. It's not super over the top steampunk, and everyone's version of steampunk might be a little different. Probably in this park it'll be different than most of what you've seen, simply because I like classical architecture and I like Victorian and French architecture, so there's going to be a good bit of that. Of course there will also be standard, I don't know if you want to call it standard, but steampunk architecture that is over the top steampunk in addition, and hopefully it'll be a good mix that will make this area of the park interesting. So here I'm working on the dome, and I'm trying to make it more than just a sphere or half sphere. So I'm putting a little bit more of a different shape into it. And while I'm, building these things, and you'll see in later videos, I get inspiration from a lot of places. So I kind of have my own collection of images that I have stored up over several years playing Planet Coaster, where I'm looking for inspiration from places like Pinterest and using Google images searches to find things I find interesting. A lot of them have fantastical elements, so even if I am making something that is maybe even a pirate theme or another theme, there would probably be a little bit of fantastical elements to it, just because I find that more interesting. So here I ended up using these Viking pieces, columns, because they have some interest to them rather than just the square parts that are the stucco pieces I was using before. So I redo this rib of the dome to show a little bit more detail. One thing I do try to be kind of aware of is the number of polys and the number of pieces I'm using. This particular building does end up having quite a few pieces, I think over 1,000. So hopefully as the build goes on, I will find ways to not use so many pieces, but at the same time I do like a high level of detail. The expectation of using a lot of pieces is part of the reason I believe this will be a smaller park. So here I skipped a little bit from the recording in regard to these segments between the ribs of the dome. I first tried roofing pieces and it was really nice looking, but I felt like it was a little bit normal. So I ended up getting out glass pieces and doing some interesting things. And so here I'm showing you basically how I did that over there, the central section. But of course, the openings between these two ribs that make up the main entrance and the other side, or the other facades, are different. And this side is larger, so I had to kind of figure out a different way to do it and still get the effect that I liked. And so that's what I'm doing here. So here I'm adding the padding underneath the dome, and you'll see that I'm going to put a hole in the center. That's because I decided that I wanted it, I believe it's called an Oculus, basically a pendulum that will swing in the center, and you'll see that in a second after I put the hole in here. Here's the movers that I use. I used 2 of the new movers from the sorcery. I guess it's they're from the sorcery pack, or no, I think they were just from an update. I can't remember. Anyway, putting 2 of them together actually managed to make something that moved back and forth, which was with a small degree. So it allowed me to do this nicely. And then both of those are attached to a rotator, so we get this interesting pendulum movement. It's not perfect, and I actually had to put it on a sequencer that loops, so it has a moment when it like stutters every time it loops, but it works for the most part. So I moved the path closer, and there I am adding a railing for it, and then I go about creating the end of the pendulum for this effect, which I think ended up pretty nice. So here I am gonna build the top of the dome, and I start doing various different shapes which are interesting. I think that I was trying to make this kind of like it was stone. I couldn't figure out which color to make it, but can always go back and change it later. And I'm also using the basic shapes, basically using a yellow goldish color, trying to give it a gold look to it, but you'll see that later in a moment here I go and replace some of those with some pieces that are actually metal pieces in the game. Here that's actually a nautical piece which is metal, and then I'm trying to change it to a color which matches. But the sphere on top, you're going to see here in a second that I do end up just removing it because I decided to put something on the top that will rotate and be more interesting, and that involves using some glass panels. I don't actually show myself attaching them to the rotators, but it's pretty simple. But I think it looks kind of nice, a little dorky, but it looks okay, I think, in the end. So we'll see. I can always change it later. So this is the finished rotunda. I've done some interior work off camera, but you can see the pendulum working. And this is the top. You can see it spinning. So with that, I will leave you with an introduction to the character that will be the main part of this ride.
Oh, hello.